Does it matter which view of God that someone has? One of the questions says, can we all just agree to disagree on the specifics? I didn't make it up.
No, I know you did. And please forgive me for laughing, but I imagine somebody saying that about physics and chemistry. Can we all just agree to disagree on specifics? But I understand the question, of course. And it's a very important one. It's the question of other religions and so on. And it deserves to be treated seriously, again, because all of us are human beings made in the image of God. That's my premise. So my response to this question is in two stages. Stage one is this. It's to observe the common morality that exists in people of all religions or none. That is a very striking fact. C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, which everybody ought to read, The Abolition of Man, there's a little chapter at the end that talks about this. Well, let me specify it for the sake of clarity. The golden rule, do unto others as you would that they did do to you, is to be found in all religions, is to be found in all philosophies, is to be found in the Humanist Manifesto of Atheism, and so on and so forth. You find it everywhere. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because once a debate about the specifics of religion starts, emotion rises. And very rapidly, there's a loss of respect. I know the truth and you don't. That kind of thing. And I therefore think it is enormously important that we take seriously this fact. See, whether a person believes in God or not, from where I sit, they're moral beings made in the image of God, and therefore they deserve my infinite respect. And I find that we can, and I can. I've got friends in most religions, or none. I find that once that basis of respect is established, that I'm not condemning their morality, for instance. Indeed, I have atheist friends who will often put me to shame. So that's not the issue. Religions in general don't differ on that level very much. Of course, some believe you can have n wives and other n-2 and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, the basic core of honesty, truth, integrity, and so on is there. So now what about the differences? Well, they exist. And there's no point in pretending they don't exist, as the question suggests. Leave Christianity out of it. Hinduism, with its hundreds of thousands of gods, will never agree with Islam, and so on. So how do we approach these things? Well, I only know one way of approaching anything like this, and it's a question of evidence. Let me specify. The three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Judaism believes that Jesus died but didn't rise. Islam believes he didn't die. Christianity believes he died and rose. Those are three mutually exclusive claims about history. They cannot all be true. Which is true? We've got to decide for ourselves. And read the evidence. That's the only way I know. And I'm a Christian because I have come to the conclusion that the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus and his death, of course, holds. Indeed, I've become, if I may make a shameless bit of advertising, sir, I've become so concerned about the constant cry of people like Dawkins and Bertrand Russell, there isn't enough evidence. You know, Bertrand Russell was once asked what he would do if he met God, and was asked why he hadn't believed in him. He'd say, not enough evidence, God, not enough evidence. So I decided in my last book, which has just come out, Gunning for God, to look at the evidence for the resurrection through the eyes of David Hume, the skeptic. And I think that's a slightly different way of approaching it than has been done before. So that's almost the end of a brief introduction to a short answer, but it's not quite. Because there's another reason. Because really, what this question is asking me, it's a personal question. How do you decide between these things? You are not only a theist, you're a Christian, isn't that right? And so you're asking that question. Well, The other way I have of looking at this, which I find helpful, is to ask, what is a religion? And what I discover in talking to many people around the world is there is a way of looking at a religion a bit like a course at UPenn. That is, there's an entrance door, some sort of ceremony that gets you in to UPenn. And then there's a path that you're to follow, and it goes up and down in a wavy line, if you can imagine it. Some of you are up at the top of it at the moment. Some of you are terrified down at the bottom, I know. Okay, because you know that there's a whacking great door waiting for you at the other end. It's called final examinations, all right? Now, the interesting thing about that is you've got a path, and you've got very kind professors like this good man here who have your best interests at heart, but he cannot guarantee that all his law students are going to get through. Why is that? Because the whole way in which the system operates is merit. You have got to pass those exams. Now, I meet many people, including professing Christians, who say, that's exactly what we believe. We have some sort of initiation ceremony, either done on us as an infant or an adult. We try to stay in the path, we listen to the teaching, but we're waiting for the final assessment, where the scales of justice, where our good deeds are weighed against our evil deeds. And then we hope we'll be accepted. But of course, we're not sure. It would be arrogant to be sure. That's religion, as many people have described it to me. It's not Christianity. And here's where the big difference is. Christianity starts not with a ceremony, but with a person who says, I am the door. And Jesus makes a diagnosis which is radical and painful. He tells me exactly what the verdict of the judgment will be if I do not repent. And I know it in my own heart anyway, because I failed even my own standards, let alone God's standards. And here's the question that every religion worthy of the name has got to face. On what basis can a relationship with God be built? And Jesus' claim is this: you cannot build it on your own merit. And he's come to die for us, so that if we trust him, we can receive forgiveness and acceptance at the beginning of the pathway. Now, that may seem very unusual to you, but it isn't, you know. Let me change the analogy totally. Do you know, when I went to university, I saw a girl on day one. Some of you fellows saw a girl on day one too. I saw a girl on day one, and she was beautiful. And she eventually married me, and we've been married now for 43 years. Now, suppose I had come to her and presented her with a book of laws.
It's getting a little personal now.
Yeah. Laws about cooking. If you're going to make an apple cake, thou shalt take so much flour and so much sugar and so much thing, and thou shalt put it in an oven, and thou shalt heat the oven to 400 degrees, and you get an apple cake. Yes, very good. And I said, now, my dear, I would like you to be my wife, but of course I couldn't accept you now. Now, if you cook for me for the next 30 or 40 years and do a decent job of it, and get enough money to give me an extra holiday or two a year, then I would think of accepting you. Well, you're all laughing. Why are you laughing? Because that's how millions of people think of God. Exactly like that. If I cook well enough, God, will you accept me? You would never insult a fellow human being by thinking like that. Never. And it amazes me as I travel around the world how many people have got a concept of God that, if you think about it for a moment, is the exact opposite. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is the thrill, and this is why I'm a Christian, really. Other religions must speak for themselves on this, and have the right to, and ought to. But as far as I'm concerned, Jesus competes with nobody, because he offers me something nobody else offers me. And that is this: a knowledge of forgiveness here and now that sets me free to live. I live for God, not in order to gain acceptance. That's slavery. I live for God because I've got it. That's the difference. And that is the trigger point for me because that makes sense of all my life's experience. And it also cogs in with some very, very deep realities about the nature of forgiveness and peace with God. So forgive the length of the thing, but you will ask these difficult questions, you know.
Got to ask what I got to ask.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.